I think I'd like to take you into, on a journey, or whatever you can call it, into the picture of the human body and what's all connected with that. And of course, like I said last night, we owe a lot to Audrey McAllen, but she was always studying Rudolf Steiner's lectures. That's what came from Rudolf Steiner. Later, when people discovered her extra lesson book and when her book Sleep was also published, let's say us, our generation that found this work, we found out that what she has worked on was also found in outer science, but Audrey didn't know. So, for instance, when one of the doctors, for instance, when Audrey was lecturing, this doctor told Audrey she got all the neurology right. But Audrey only knew nothing about neurology. But she only studied Rudolf Steiner's lectures and meditated on that, and from that developed these exercises. So it was always a joy to find out that what she had found out was confirmed in what we find in outer science, and that's the path we go on. We are still continuing, let's say that. And I remember that when we were I think it was in 89 or 88, no, 89, that we were, Ingun was there and some of us were there, Mary Jo was there. We were in England with Audrey and we have a sit on a chair, and we had all our questions, the same questions you all have, and we could fire them to her. How do you get to this? What does this mean? The astral body moves in a spiral. How do you know? Etc., etc. And there were a lot of questions. She answers, I can't remember where I got it from. Or for instance, Audrey, how do you know that the astral body moves in a spiral? And she said, everybody knows. Do you remember? And I said, but Audrey, I don't know. Who told you that? So you see, there were things that came out of the old anthroposophists, which were common knowledge at that time, or even in the theosophical circles. These things were known. But our generation, we were not educated this way. And you see, when you go to the 1909 lectures, and all these lectures we are mentioning that Audrey worked on, those are the early lectures Steiner gave. And like he says in the first lecture of the 1909 is jargon, but among extra lesson people, we know what we are speaking of. The holy 1909 lectures. So, the first lecture, which this cycle is called Anthroposophy, Rudolf Steiner says it himself. He wants to give a fundament for anthroposophy. So what's in there is really a foundation for all the work he did later. And I'm sure that the teachers that were in the first Waldorf school in Stuttgart, when they had this 14 days of introduction into pedagogy, they all knew these lectures because they were available at that time in, I don't know how they did it, print or type out or even handwriting, but they how do you call it? They circulated amongst the anthroposophists. So I think these teachers knew. So when in the 8th lecture of Study of Men, or what's it called nowadays? Or something, Foundation of the Psychological something? It's a funny title, but anyway, yeah. Well, when he speaks about the senses, he very quickly goes through the senses, because he knew that the teachers that were present, they already knew the rest. So now we are educated as Waldorf teachers with Study of Men, or whatever the title now is, Allgemeine Menschenkunde, let's say the German title, and we don't know what went before. So you see, but we have to go back to these sources as well. Extra lesson is a way to go there. Now, there is another cycle. Rudolf Steiner speaks about the physical body, and there he is very specific about how the physical body has two different aspects. And that also is a fundament, because later in the Study of Man, in the Allgemeine Menschenkunde, there he refers to that, but he doesn't tell. That's always the trouble. He doesn't tell. But he assumed people know, or otherwise he knew that the people knew. You see, because he was always with the audience. He knew what questions were lived there and could answer them even before people asked them. So, and that is this important thing, and I think this is something from the extra lesson movement can be brought into the anthroposophical movement, and especially into the Waldorf movement, is this division between that what is structural, that what is the body itself as an instrument, as a vessel, and that what is belonging to the constitution. So these two sides. And, well, that's what I want to go into more deeply now for you, to get a better understanding and how you can work with both sides, or at least know what you're doing when you are working with it. Because we can separate it, but that's for our thinking. Because when we work with children or adults or persons, it's never divided. It's always together. You see, so you have to know what you're doing and which side you're addressing. And of course, you address them both at the same time. So, that's the first step I would like to take with you. And perhaps you already know, but it doesn't matter to repeat it once every time again. So, when we speak about the physical body itself, we have these two aspects. We have the structure that gives us the opportunity to orientate in space, to be in the vertical, and that belongs to our incarnation on Earth. Only on the Earth we have three-dimensional space. It's difficult to imagine yourself that in a previous stage of the planet Earth there was no third dimension. It's difficult for us to understand that because we are used to have these three planes. That's where our consciousness lives in. But imagine yourself that you are a fish and you live in water, and you have never had the opportunity to jump up and come above the water and experience that you are in air, for instance. So that you are limited to swim underwater. Then the perspective is totally different. You see? And you are not even upright, but you are always in the horizontal because you are a fish. So you are living in this plane, and front and back maybe, but not into the vertical, something like that. So Steiner speaks about that, and there's another book that's written by the famous anthroposophical Dr. Ernst Marty, which this title is The Four Ethers, and he also speaks about the development of the dimensions. And then in this previous state of development of the Earth, which is called esoterically the old moon, there was no three dimensions, but there were two dimensions. So we didn't have this above and below. It wasn't there. And everything was two-dimensional. It was flat. Or not just flat, but only surface. But not something which is between above and below. Actually, that is where the small child, before it can stand up, lives in. It's the plane where all the animals live in. It's also the plane of the plants, even of trees. When we think of a tree, we think of the trunk, which stands vertical. And of course, there you have above, below. But when you look to the essential of the plant, you have only the leaf. That's the ur form of the plant. Think of Goethe. The leaf is the ur, the archetype of the plant. And when you think of a leaf, it only has surface. You see, it's two-dimensional. So leaves are going into different directions, but the essence of the plant is that it's two-dimensional.